Okay, good afternoon everyone and welcome to today's webinar on Complete Streets. Today's webinar is brought to you by Directors of Health Promotion and Education, or DHPE. I'm a project manager at DHPE, and today's presentation and content development are by ChangeLab Solutions. We have two speakers from ChangeLab Solutions today. I'd like to introduce to you Diane Dum, who's a planner at ChangeLab Solutions, where she focuses on complete streets, safe routes to school, and other policies related to active transportation. Prior to joining ChangeLab Solutions, Diane worked for Sonoma County Transportation Authority, managing alternative transportation funding programs, updating countywide bicycle and pedestrian master plans, and facilitating countywide alternative transportation committee meetings. She also wrote the City of Emeryville's Complete Streets Policy Resolution. Our second speaker from ChangeLab Solutions is Eric Calloway, who is a senior planner. Eric focuses on the links between built environment and health. He conducts research, prepares strategies, and develops tools to help communities support healthy living and sustainability. Prior to joining ChangeLab Solutions, Eric worked for 13 years as an urban design consultant. Our third speaker for today's webinar, our special guest, is Allison Mills, who's an engineer with the City of Austin Active Transportation Program, where she's responsible for planning, design, and implementation of new bicycle facilities in Austin. Previously, as a full-time consultant with the Chicago Department of Transportation Bicycle Program, she was part of the design team for the Dearborn two-way protected bike lane through Chicago's Central Business District. As a traffic engineer with HDR Engineering, she developed the Georgetown Sidewalk Master Plan and Transportation Master Plans for San Marcos and Cedar Park, Texas. Welcome to all three speakers today. Diane, I'd like to turn it over to you for presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Like Cheryl said, I'm Diane Dome, and I focus on transportation planning here at ChangeLab. First, I'm going to walk us through a few disclaimer slides, as we must do. This is a disclaimer from our funder. Basically, we are representing ourselves and our organizations and not the U.S. government. And this is the disclaimer slide that we have from ChangeLab Solutions, which basically describes that anything that we say here today is simply informational only and does not constitute as legal advice. As Cheryl already introduced us, here are pictures of us so you can have an idea of what we look like. I'm Diane Dome, and Eric Calloway will be following me in our presentation today. And then our guest speaker we have with us is Allison Mills from the City of Austin. So first, a little bit about ChangeLab Solutions. We create innovative laws and policies to ensure everyday health for all. Our solutions address all aspects of a just, vital, and thriving community, like healthy food, housing, schools, transportation, public safety, and the environment. So here's today's roadmap. As you can see, we are going over introductions and overview right now. Then I will lead us into a discussion on the built environment and health, and then walk through the basics of complete streets. Eric will talk about complete streets design, and then our guest speaker, Allison, from the City of Austin, will be bringing us some real-life examples of projects that are going on at the city level. So to get started, let's first spend a little time talking about why complete streets are important. To do that, we need to talk about what healthy communities look like. First of all, when we talk about a healthy community, we're talking about how our built environment plays a role in shaping our health. And we know through research that the built environment significantly shapes health outcomes. So let's take a closer look. Imagine a place like this. What do you think some of the health outcomes of living in this community might be? Well, it looks like you would have a very easy time finding opportunities to engage in physical activity in your daily life. You'll be able to take advantage of greenery like trees and landscaping, which have both positive mental and physical health benefits. Trees also provide shade, and here, along with the seating area, they are helping to buffer people who are walking away from cars and other dangerous situations. And the buildings are human scale, and the windows are front facing, making it safer to be out and about. And there are places to sit and talk, thereby increasing social interactions. These are just some of the many examples of how the built environment can positively shape our behavior and health outcomes. So what makes a community less healthy? Well, for one thing, long commutes that we take alone in our cars prove to be very unhealthy for us. And studies show that the commute is the least happy part of a person's day. People with very long commutes tend to feel more tired and less enjoyment during their workday than those with shorter commutes. And long commutes also play a role in poor air quality. And of course, this also leads to high levels of stress. As well, we have found through studies that each additional hour spent in a car per day is associated with a 6% increase in the likelihood of becoming obese. And of course, many of our communities look like this. They are very inhospitable to people who are walking, biking, and taking transit. As you can see in the center of this image, there is a pedestrian who's stuck in the middle of the street trying to find a safe way to cross. As well, many of our streets are very wide. Imagine what an 8-year-old child might feel like when they're trying to cross the street, or perhaps an 80-year-old adult who needs special assistance to get across the street. This can be a very fearful experience. As well, many of our communities are still not updated with ADA standards. And I'm sure we've all felt like this at an intersection. It reminds me of the game Frogger, but it doesn't have to be this way. And when we think about the factors that determine our health, we often think that our genes are largely responsible for our health, but our genes are only responsible for 15% of that which determines our health. However, the environment is responsible for 60% of that which determines our health. Our physical, social, political, and economic environment greatly determines our health. Therefore, our environment greatly shapes our overall health, and complete streets improves our health. So what is a complete street exactly? Well, in its most basic form, a complete street provides a safe, comfortable place for all road users. So let's take a look at a few examples. Here is an example of a complete street in a dense urban environment. Oftentimes in dense urban environments, it is necessary to separate different modes of transportation to provide safety for all. This is another example of a complete street from a slightly more suburban environment. As you can see, it feels very safe and comfortable to walk and bike here as well as drive. And this is what a complete street might look like in a residential place. Again, it feels very safe and comfortable to walk, bike, and drive. And this is what complete streets looks like in the rural environment. As you can see, the shoulder here is wide enough to provide a safe place for people who might be biking or walking along this corridor. Therefore, complete streets really are for all sizes and types of communities. But let's be clear, complete streets is not about putting a bike lane on every single street. It's about providing the right amount of infrastructure for that particular context. And this is where many communities need to focus their time. So let's briefly talk about the benefits of complete streets. Complete streets create more local jobs than traditional road-only projects. Complete streets also increase local tax funds. It has been found in many different studies that pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit riders tend to spend more than drivers. And here's another study from a different city that's demonstrating the same information. Complete streets also increase street safety. Many of you may have already seen this particular slide, but it's important to reiterate this important point that if you are hit by a vehicle going 20 miles per hour, 9 out of 10 people will survive that collision. However, if you are hit by a car going 40 miles per hour, only 1 person out of 10 is likely to survive. Therefore, decreasing speeds is incredibly important to increasing safety for all road users. Research has also demonstrated to us that wider travel lanes equal higher speeds. In fact, a research that was completed last year demonstrated that about a 10-foot lane, travel lane experiences the fewest amount of collisions. Another research study demonstrated that narrow streets also experience fewer crashes. And narrow, slow-speed streets are much safer for people who are trying to cross the street. And I know this very well because I have to cross a 4-lane road every single day when I'm going to work, and it is very challenging to cross that street. Complete streets increase healthy outcomes. If you create an environment that is safe and comfortable for all road users, then people will walk more, bike more, and hence are less likely to be obese or diabetic. As well, complete streets also benefit people who use transit. And about a third of people who use public transportation to commute to work meet their daily requirements for physical activity simply by walking to and from the bus stop. Our street network affects our health in very deep and real ways. If you live in an area that has a well-defined grid street network, you are less likely to be obese, have high blood pressure, or heart disease. Complete streets really is not a one-size-fits-all solution as we described in previous slides talking about context. It's really about figuring out what is necessary for that particular street in that particular neighborhood. So before I turn it over to Eric, I'm going to briefly talk about Complete Streets policy. So what do we mean by policy? In general, policies are binding, they're written, and they apply throughout the community. When we look at Complete Streets policies, we most often see Complete Streets policies in the form of resolutions, local ordinances, as well as in zoning language, such as requiring bike lanes or particular width of sidewalk. This is where zoning language becomes very important with regard to complete streets. So why does policy matter? Well, new research is coming out that demonstrates that communities that are located in a state that has a complete streets policy are more likely to have their own local policy. And communities with complete streets policies have higher percentages of people who bike, walk, or take transit. Therefore, policy can help make those environmental changes that are necessary for positive health outcomes. At ChangeLab Solutions, we spend a lot of our time helping communities develop their own complete streets policies. And in fact, we have a variety of resources on our website. And these are 10 ideal elements that are included in a complete streets policy. These have been developed by the National Complete Streets Coalition, and we make sure to include each of these 10 elements in all of the policies that we develop. You can find our model policies on our website, and I encourage you to check out our website, see all of the resources that we have. In fact, we just updated our Model Complete Streets resolution for local governments last year. And later this year, we will be releasing our Implementing Complete Streets guide probably midway through this year. So I really encourage you to check out our website and see all of our resources. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us. So now I would like to turn it over to Eric Calloway.
Thank you, Diane. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the anatomy of complete streets. What do they look like in practice, and how do we create them? So conventional street design focuses on cars and is driven by what we call capacity. By capacity, we mean how many cars the street can accommodate and how much delay drivers experience on these streets. So capacity is typically measured in something like average daily traffic, or ADT, and level of service, or LOS. And streets have typically been designed to maximize this vehicular capacity. Ultimately, though, how many cars a street can accommodate is limited by how much space is available within the right-of-way. So when the focus is on vehicular capacity, that right-of-way, that street space, tends to be dominated by cars. And the space left over for pedestrians, bikes, and transit is small and squeezed into the remaining space available after those cars have been accommodated. When walking and biking is given a low priority in this way, the pedestrian and bicyclist experience is poor. At a minimum, the facilities are limited and the experience is uncomfortable, and at worst, the facilities are non-existent and the experience is dangerous. Auto-dominated streets also encourage high speeds and are wide with long crossing distances. As a result, vehicular pedestrian collisions are more likely in these instances, and we just heard from Diane how high speeds increase the danger of those collisions. So with complete streets, we look at street capacity differently. We focus on how the street can accommodate all users and modes of transportation within the right-of-way and the space available, and not just cars. So how do we rebalance street capacity to do a better job of accommodating all users? Well, one major way is to reconfigure streets to take some of that capacity away from the cars and reallocate it to other users. And we can do this by narrowing or converting travel lanes or parking lanes, and then using the space that we free up for improvements such as wider sidewalks, bike lanes, or transit-only lanes. And we can see here some examples of before, where we have a completely auto-dominated street, and then after, when transit lanes and bike lanes have been added with some of that auto capacity converted. Now, whether we reallocate space or not, we can still upgrade streets to improve the experience of various users. For pedestrians, we can do that by creating buffers between the sidewalk and the roadway using landscaping. And the greater the separation, the more significant the landscaping, the more of a buffer is created from vehicular traffic. In more urban locations, the physical separation isn't as large, and in those cases, on-street parking and wider sidewalks, which accommodate more pedestrians, can be used. And along the most activity-oriented retail or commercial streets, the sidewalk should run closer to buildings to allow pedestrians access to shop front windows and entrances. The sidewalk should also be much wider in these cases to allow the greater number of pedestrians to easily pass each other. And street trees in these locations should be in grates so that the landscaping doesn't cut street parking off from businesses, and those trees generally should have higher branches to allow easy views of shop fronts from the roadway. The pedestrian realm should also include a variety of amenities, including seating, trash receptacles, pedestrian scale lighting, and human scale details. Crosswalks are also an important part of the pedestrian experience. Designs for crosswalks should consider the crosswalk locations that make it easy for pedestrians to get to their destination. This includes mid-block crosswalks, especially along streets with long blocks. Crosswalks should be detailed to be highly visible to all. This guides pedestrians to safe crossing locations, and it alerts drivers to be aware of pedestrians. And treatments include striping, which could be standard or more decorative paving details, signage, and lighting, such as in-roadway flashers. Sidewalks are common, but many streets lack adequate bicycle facilities. The equivalent of sidewalks for bicycles include lanes that are shared by both bicycles and cars, and this is typically indicated with sharrows, striped bike lanes, and protected bikeways, also known as cycle tracks and bike paths. And these final configurations create a safe and comfortable bicycling experience by placing wide striped zones, parked cars, curbed, or landscaped medians in between the bike lane and adjacent car traffic. Like cars, when you're out on a bicycle, you want to have somewhere to park when you get to your destination. And so bike racks can be strategically located along the curb on sidewalks, and they can also be located in street parking lanes, trading a single parked car for multiple bike racks. As far as transit, for people to be motivated to use transit other than driving, the transit experience must be convenient and appealing. This includes safe and adequately sized amenities such as bus shelters and benches where users wait for transit. It also includes transit-only lanes for buses, bus rapid transit, or light rail. And these dedicated lanes allow transit to move more quickly and efficiently, making timetables more consistent and reducing travel times. Now, even when accommodating other users, streets must still accommodate cars, and that means providing places to park. This isn't a bad thing, as we've seen how on-street parking can create a buffer for pedestrians. It also generally acts as a traffic calming measure. And parking can be provided in a variety of configurations, including parallel parking and angled parking. And angled parking is generally easier to navigate, but it can also be a source of collision for drivers backing out of spaces. So more recently, an alternative to conventional angled parking is back-in, or also known as front-out angled parking. And this configuration has lower collision rates than conventional angled parking because drivers have a much better visibility of other cars and bicyclists when they're pulling out of spaces. Now, streets don't have to be rigidly programmed. Areas of streets can remain flexible and be used for multiple purposes. These flexible zones are generally parking areas or slow driving areas that can also be used for activities such as outdoor dining, outdoor product display, or even special events. So here on the right you can see this central parking area on this street that is used for special events such as farmers markets and community events. Now, beyond reconfiguring streets to shift capacity from cars to other users, vertical streetscape elements such as trees and streetlights are the most powerful tool to shape the street experience. When streets look and feel wide, cars will drive faster and pedestrians will feel small and vulnerable. And here's the same street. You can see that simply adding street trees can have a significant impact on the feeling of enclosure and the visual perception of the street width. This is because when streets lack vertical elements, there's nothing to visually define the space of the street or provide a buffer for pedestrians. So the result will be a space that feels very wide, especially if buildings are low and significantly set back from the roadway. Adding substantial vertical elements within the street will change the perception of the roadway even without reconfiguring the space. So you can see that this roadway feels wide and the pedestrian space feels squeezed. And here, after placing street trees in the parking lane, completely changes the perception of the street for the pedestrians. It also completely changes the perception of the street for drivers. Now, placing trees or streetlights in parking lanes is important to remember. It requires curb islands to help prevent cars from accidentally running into them while parking. And this can work with angled parking as well. Streetlights can also create this effect, but it's generally not quite as powerful. To be effective for streetlights, they must be placed closer together. Another place verticals can have a significant effect is in the center of the street. Wide multi-lane streets often have continuous center turn lanes. Replacing a center turn lane with a landscape median creates a dramatic transformation. Landscape center medians also create safer streets. They reduce collisions by reducing conflicts caused by turning vehicles, and the visual narrowing contributes to slower speeds. Note that some transportation departments have standards for the placement of vertical elements close to travel lanes and near intersections due to how they affect the visibility of oncoming traffic. Now, they're not as powerful, but horizontal surface treatments can also have some positive effects. In addition to upgrading the character of a street, colored paving in bike lanes, parking lanes, turn lanes, and transit lanes can provide some traffic calming by visually narrowing the roadway. Surface treatments also increase safety through improved pedestrian and bike visibility. And these areas are also excellent opportunities to use permeable paving, which contrasts with the roadway and also provides additional stormwater management benefits. Additional traffic calming strategies include a variety of elements that require cars to slow down to navigate past them. This includes roadway pinches and speed bumps, as well as visual and physical elements in the center of or along the sides of a roadway which create lane shifts or perceived barriers. Now, which design elements are appropriate in any situation depends on the function and the context of the street. Street design must coordinate the needs of anticipated vehicular, transit, bicycle, and pedestrian users, and also consider the buildings and land uses along the street. So in areas that have high pedestrian activity, you might want slower traffic and bike lanes for a wide variety of users. And then in other locations where there's a lower density of pedestrians and bicycles, there may be less of a need to accommodate those users as strongly. Complete streets should also serve the community's vision for that street, neighborhood, or district. Creating that vision requires bringing multiple sectors together, such as planning, transportation, police, fire, economic development, and health departments, as well as engaging the community. It's about getting people to the table to identify their needs and priorities, coordinate work across sectors, and develop complete street solutions to those issues. Now, it can feel daunting, but there's a wide variety of resources available to provide guidance on designing complete streets. The National Association of Transportation Officials has an Urban Street Design Guide and Urban Bikeway Design Guide, and this provides detailed coverage of complete streets design elements. The Institute of Transportation Engineers, in the collaboration with the Congress for New Urbanism, has a Designing Walkable and Urban Thoroughfares Guide, a context-sensitive approach. This includes comprehensive guidance on Institute for Transportation Engineers approved approaches for planning and designing complete streets. And the U.S. Department of Transportation's Federal Highway Administration Guide has a series of useful tools to select pedestrian and bicycle safety design elements in response to identified roadway deficiencies. And there are a wide variety of other resources that can be found online. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Allison.
Hi there. I'm Allison Mills from the City of Austin Transportation Department with the Active Transportation Program, and I'm going to kind of fill you in on how we are working to complete Austin's streets. So first, a little bit about why are we doing this? What's the reason for this? And we really think that by routinely responding to the needs of people on foot, using transit and biking, we can make all those modes safer and easier for everybody. And so we hope that we hope to get people of all ages and abilities more options for going to work, to school, whether you're going to the grocery store to visit family. We want to build streets that can really be part of the community and benefit our community from increasing the capacity on our existing streets to improving health and providing those expanded transportation options. So through our policy, we are really trying to integrate pedestrians better into our transportation network. Some of our ongoing efforts include our sidewalk program, which is currently going through an extensive process to prioritize our city sidewalk needs, which it's been estimated that we're missing $800,000 in new sidewalk in order to fill in sidewalk gaps. And so that's a really important part. We have our Great Streets program, which I'll get into a little more later, looking to include more sidewalk cafes in the downtown area for a better pedestrian environment. Urban trails, which we consider to be our paved trails throughout the city, and then also implementing more pedestrian hybrid beacons for multi-lane roadways to facilitate safe crossing where there's a need. This is a photo from off of 6th Street, which is our one of our very, very popular entertainment districts, and you can just kind of get an idea here of the level of pedestrian activity that the street elicits. This is an example of some pedestrian infrastructure that we have been implementing around trying to improve. You'll see that there's a pedestrian refuge island, which creates a 2-stage crossing for pedestrians. There's a bike lane on this street, which helps to further reduce the crossing distance that a pedestrian has to go across. Continental crosswalk markings is becoming more of our standard practice, and of course ADA ramps on both sides for that access. We're also integrating transit throughout our policy through the use of our bus rapid transit system, our commuter rail. We've got transit priority lanes downtown. One thing we've been looking at recently are what we call transit queue jump lanes at intersections, which would give a bus kind of a bypass to the traffic that's queued up at an intersection to kind of improve the quality of service, improve predictability and of transit trips to make it a more appealing form of transportation. We also are looking to incorporate more green space as a placemaking mechanism. This is an example of a project under construction right now. You can see there's a shared pedestrian transit bikeway running through the middle, a rain garden, a pedestrian bridge, and just having more spaces like this, in the middle of the city to not lose that, to incorporate more nature basically into our built environment. So our Complete Streets policy, it centers around mobility, focuses on urban design, creating green streets. Something that's really helped propel this Complete Streets movement is our comprehensive plan, Imagine Austin, that came out in 2012. Some of the priority programs include investing in a compact and connected Austin, sustainably managing our water resources, using green infrastructure to integrate nature into the city, as I kind of showed an example of before, trying to grow Austin's creative economy, developing and maintaining household affordability, which is a huge challenge. It created our Healthy Austin program, and through this we hope to revise our development regulations and processes so we can realize this vision of a more compact and connected city. What we see as the benefit to having this compacted connected city is public health benefits, improving our transportation system, environmental sustainability, social justice, economic well-being, and affordability. So we define our complete streets through these 8 principles, and those are complete streets serve all modes and users, take them all into consideration. A complete street requires a connected travel network for more route options. Complete streets are beautiful, interesting, and comfortable places, just places you want to be, that attract people. Complete streets require best practice design criteria and context-sensitive solutions. It's already been mentioned a couple of times throughout this webinar that it's really important to kind of look at the situation at hand, look at the context to provide like the best solution possible. There's not one kind of cookie cutter complete streets method that'll work everywhere. Protect Austin's sustainability and environment. Complete streets include all roadways, all projects, and phases. We've learned it's important to kind of get involved in a project early on to make sure it's really trying to incorporate pedestrian elements, bicycle elements, and considering all users. One of the things that is important in this movement is also making sure that all city departments work together, really communicate as we work towards the same goal. And also complete streets require appropriate performance measures so we can kind of see like how are these streets functioning and affecting day-to-day life before and after. So, early last year we released the best complete, well, one of our resources, was the Best Complete Streets Policies of 2014. I'm going to kind of skip through this a little bit. It's just a little more information on our Complete Streets policy and how we define it here. So it's been a big few years when it comes to our process and getting our Complete Streets going. In 2014 the policy was adopted. Close to then we started our Complete Streets program that has a manager and a consulting engineer. And this was also the time that the active transportation program that I'm a part of was instilled. And that year we updated our bike plan as well as our trails plan. This year we're working on our Vision Zero. We're joining that movement and kind of crafting our way of implementing that. Code Next, which is Austin's initiative to revise our land development code so we can actually implement all these compact and connected ideas. And then we've got a plan going forward to kind of continue this Complete Streets movement and really realize it here in Austin. Eric mentioned NACDO before. NACDO is a really tremendous resource for how to implement these complete streets, different tools for implementing complete streets. There's an urban street design guide, there's a bikeways design guide, and at some point there will also be a transit guide, which should be really helpful. So now I'm going to give you some details on a few projects I really feel kind of showcase complete street elements here in Austin. One of which is South Congress Avenue. It's a big entertainment place, totally packed on the weekends. People walking, biking, a real destination here in Austin for locals and people visiting. South Congress Avenue is a really important arterial for moving all modes. This picture showcases how it leads right into the heart of downtown. Definitely a major destination here in the city. So a few details on the project. Like I said, it's an entertainment and tourist area. The scope of the project hoped to incorporate a new bicycle lane and also rapid transit stations. Some special features include stormwater treatment channels, which I'll show you some pictures of, as well as pedestrian bulb outs, which have bicycle racks for easy bike parking upon arrival on bike. And this was one of our first implementations of reverse angle parking, or that front out, back in angle parking that Eric mentioned earlier. And the next steps of this project would be to extend the bike facility in terms of expanding our bike network. This kind of just shows how the project was a long time coming. It was initiated by the 1998 bond election and then all the way till 2011 for completion. Lots of lessons learned there. Lots of teamwork throughout the city. Again, I mentioned the back and angle parking. It's been shown to be safer for all modes, drivers, cyclists, pedestrians. The fact that the car pulls out of the parking spot the way it does. They have that visibility to kind of look to the left and see, see a bicyclist coming. And in this case, we actually do have the bike lane right alongside that back and angle parking, but it seemed to work really well. There's a big demand for parking as well down here, and this particular section of South Congress is a very steep hill. And so here, since we needed the back and angle parking on both sides for the stakeholders, we have a bike lane on the uphill portion, and then it's a shared lane coming back down on the other side. When the parking demand tapers off, we're able to do parallel parking on one side and the back and angle parking on the other. This is an example of one of those, the pedestrian bulb outs I mentioned. You'll see the APS push button unit, the bike racks. What these bulb outs helped to do was narrow the crossing distance, which is an original 90 feet to 55 feet. And because we were able to narrow the crossing distance, through that we were able to retime the entire corridor to accommodate an appropriate pedestrian crossing time, but also improve progression of vehicles throughout the corridor. So everyone was able to win in that instance. This is one of our transit stops, which is incorporated into one of the bulb outs. Couple major transit lines run up and down South Congress, so we really are able to accommodate all modes on this roadway. It's just another picture of South Congress. You can see lots of pedestrian activity, lots of people crossing the street, lots of demand for that. Another project we had is Guadalupe Street, which runs right next to campus, to the UT Austin campus. And this is where Eric mentioned earlier the strategy of converting lanes, narrowing lanes in order to free up more space. And just in general, that's a really crucial tool that we use in Austin to help expand our bike network and improve our bicycle network. We piggyback off of the resurfing schedule where we know we'll be able to start with a blank slate on the street, and we look at, can we narrow the lanes? Could we possibly convert a 4-lane section to a 3-lane section? And back that up with traffic analysis that will still function. So I just wanted to mention that. But you'll see here there's these pedestrian spaces created with this epoxied aggregate. That's what those planters are sitting on top of, and the bikeway runs behind this. And so a little bit more about the project. It was 5 blocks long, incorporated protected bicycle lane on one side. Our Metro Rapid, which is our bus rapid transit, runs along this corridor, and there's also several bike share stations. Special features included the bikeway itself is green to highlight the area. There's buffers, as I kind of showed in the last photo with the rapid bus stops. Pedestrian islands, planters, just really kind of trying to improve that environment for pedestrians, give them more space because lots and lots of students, locals, tourists, all up and down that street. The cars act as a buffer for the protected bike lane, which you can kind of see a little more easily in a photo coming up. But this is the beginning of the protected bike lane. This is a mid-block of it. You can see that the bike lane runs behind the transit platform, which is acting as the protection here. You'll see again, and this was highly inspired, almost a carbon copy of what New York City has done in terms of using paint and epoxied aggregate to create these pedestrian spaces when there aren't the funds to create, to perhaps do curbing right away. Okay, yeah, so here you can see well how the cars act as the protection. There's enough of a buffer zone there where you'll see in the foreground the door is open and it's not intruding into the bike lane at all. I mentioned earlier Great Streets, which is a kind of one of our earlier complete streets-esque movements. And this was a movement to widen sidewalks downtown, which were about 10 feet at the time. And this program, which has been going on for about 15 years now, has extended sidewalks from anywhere from 18 to 32 feet, has incorporated street furnishings, benches, bike racks, public art, street trees. It was mentioned earlier in this presentation, kind of having those trees closer to the roadway not only acts as a buffer for the pedestrians, but can also kind of change the feel of the driving environment as well. Sidewalk cafes, which I'll show you a couple good pictures in a moment, and there's also transit stops incorporated, improved transit stops to facilitate the transit along the roadway. Yeah, so you'll see 2nd Street here. That was a major project. Just a really great pedestrian environment. It's really just changed that area completely and created a new destination here in Austin. So it really gives the pedestrians priority here. Another Complete Streets project is our 3rd Street bicycle track, cycle track. That's a newer project. It was part of it's a 2010 bond project, and what we did was we restricted parking on one side of the street. That's again another strategy for taking back roadway width to give to other users. 2 blocks are still under construction, but most of it's operating. A lot of the design details were driven by adjacent establishments. One in particular is a valet zone that the Hyatt Hotel needed, and we were really able to work with them and come up with a solution where we were still able to maintain a protected cycle track, but they were able to have this valet zone that they needed. So that was really a success. This is showing an intersection along the 3rd Street cycle track, and you can kind of see if you look at the curbing, it almost has like a protected intersection element to it. If you're familiar with that sort of design. The 4th Street cycle track connects to the 3rd Street cycle track by a jog on a cross street, and this is always meant to be kind of a temporary rail terminal, but they're looking into upgrading it right now. We've been working really closely with them to make sure that bicycles are accommodated and pedestrians are accommodated to really have it be the best multimodal environment and accommodate all users. And this is a really recent project, Pedestrian Safety Improvement Project, just hot off the press a couple weeks ago, but a really creative, low-cost, rapid implementation way of creating bulb-outs, added pedestrian space, and there's even the element of fun, visual fun to it, what with the polka dot. So we're hoping to see kind of more of this creative use for these low-cost solutions where there's not always added funds for actual curb. So we like to think that our complete streets are lively streets. This is just a couple photos from our Viva Streets Festival that happens every year, where the streets close for cars and people really get to enjoy it, biking, walking, and have fun. And with that, I'll thank you all for having me, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Well, thank you, Allison. That was really interesting, and I loved hearing all of the different projects that are going on in Austin. So this is a chance for anyone who is on the webinar to ask any questions of any of the presenters. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box, and we will answer them as they come in. I believe Eric has a couple questions that he really wants to ask you, Allison.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Anyone who has questions, please feel free to jump in. So Allison, I saw on one of those slides that you said that the sidewalk improvements were funded by the parking. I was curious if you could give like a brief explanation of what that program was.
As far as I know, I think it had to do with the parking meters that were put on the street, that those designated parking meters, some part of that money actually went back to that. Okay. But I can kind of follow up and get you more information on that, but that's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay, Allison, I have another question here for you. Can you talk a little bit about the metrics that the City of Austin is using to measure program success beyond traffic analysis and collision data?
Yes. So I can talk pretty well to the bike side, and I mean what we really look at in terms of when we do these lane conversions and lane width reducing is we'll do like a before and after study, which is like actually collecting real data when it comes to volume and speed, so we can see before and after if one of the drivers of the project was speeding and that's a safety concern. Were we, through this project, able to reduce speeds? Like, are we seeing that kind of speed reduction? And once we go from a 4-lane roadway to a 3-lane roadway, is street still handling like that same amount of traffic as it was before, or has it kind of forced cars to be spread out throughout the network? And so that's one of the ways we kind of measure the success of our newer facilities in terms of like improving safety but still accommodating the capacity of the street. But if you have more specific questions about metrics, I can definitely follow up and get you more information about that. But I'm most familiar with the bike side of things.
So for your projects, do you do before and after traffic counts? And I don't mean only car traffic, but do you do bicycle and pedestrian counts as well?
We do. And not for all of them, but particularly facilities we feel like are filling like a gap, almost in like a if you build it they will come sense to see if it really increased ridership and drew riders and that sort of thing. So.
And is there, do you go back, sort of maybe 3 or 4 years later and do counts again to see how much it's really affecting?
Yes, we will. We actually have, we also have permanent bicycle counters which have live information of bicycle counts day to day. And so at least in those spots
eco counter?
What's that?
Is that eco counter?
I think so, yes. But that you get a really detailed view on how weather affects riding and time of year and year to year and whatnot.
So I have a question here for Eric. In a second, I'm going to ask this one really quick question for Allison. This image of 6th Street, is that on the east side?
It is. Yeah.
And is that in a... Okay, and that's in a traditionally lower income part of the city, correct?
It is. It is. Also a part of the city that, yes, traditionally lower income for sure. Also, this street has become like a popular entertainment district, which has increased the pedestrian traffic significantly.
Okay, great. So Eric, there's a question here for you. What is the best way to get community engagement in developing complete streets projects? There was a slide showing people answering questions about how they use the current system. So it's talking about community engagement.
Yeah. So there's a wide variety of ways that you can do that. Partially it depends a little bit on the project that you have. So in some cases you might have a land use plan going on, like a downtown revitalization plan, and the street design and the street experience is one aspect of that. In other cases you might have a city's complete streets policy, and the city is going through and identifying specific streets where improvements could be made. And so, a variety of community workshops or surveys can be used to basically ask questions of the community about what is their experience in the location that you're focused on first. So, how do people experience this street? What are problems that they see? And also ask them questions like, what would they like to see in this area? and then to bring back in a series of workshops or surveys ideas about how to address those deficiencies in those issues in order to get feedback on did we hear it right and what do you think about this solution, as well as to bring information back to the community about how those solutions address their issues. So sometimes you really need to respond to the community if they have concerns about from a data perspective, how does it work? They might have concerns about what does it look like, in which case you need, so if you have a data question, you might need to bring a technical expert to talk about traffic engineering. If you have a question about what might it look like, you might have to develop some visualizations to help people kind of visualize what it looks like. So it really depends on what part of the process that you're in, but it's a whole process from asking questions and being as engaging as possible. So as you mentioned here, you might have some specific questions where people can engage and kind of present their thoughts from early on in the development process all the way through design, and ideally coming back to the community afterwards and asking people how it works.
Great. And I actually have another question for Allison. Let me see if this has to do with reverse angle parking. I'm just curious if the City of Austin experienced any pushback to reverse angle parking. In particular, were any city councilors against it, or anybody in the community that was speaking against reverse angle parking?
You know, I think at
probably
first
preceded your time, but I'm just curious.
What's that? It did a little, so I can definitely follow up, especially in terms of details about council members and whatnot. But I think in the beginning it was so new that there was like a lot of confusion. You'd drive down South Congress and maybe only half the people are actually some people have pulled into the spots. But over time I feel like it has been a success, and it's something people don't like at first but then get used to.
Yeah, I just feel like there's a story there about people not understanding the changes, and that they might not like it at first, but once they get used to it, they're completely fine with it. And I feel like that's probably true for a lot of Complete Streets elements, where
absolutely.
It might be confusing. Yeah. And I was just curious about reverse angle parking because we're having discussions in Oakland about getting reverse angle parking, and it's not working.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's interesting. I'd be curious to hear what the arguments are. And
I think it's just a fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also had a question. Is there a minimum width for bike lanes in Austin?
Our desired minimum is 6.
Yeah.
And so in some cases we will get closer to 5, but we don't tend to go below 5.
And so we have just one more minute. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to type them in. It looks like we don't have any other. I just very quickly wanted to ask Allison, you said that you oftentimes Austin piggybacks onto the resurfacing program. Is that pretty much true for most of the projects? It's enabled us to, over the last few years, install 30 to 40 miles a year. So I'd say the majority of our projects are because we scrubbed the street and bridges plan for streets and got a jump on developing plans. So once the streets were resurfaced, we'd have those plans for the new configuration ready to go. A lot of these projects, if it's a lane conversion or a parking modification, there'll be a public process involved, but it's very extensive within our program. Great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being on our webinar today. We hope that you have gained more knowledge in the realm of Complete Streets, and after the webinar ends, you will be sent a a survey to fill out, so please take a few moments and fill that out. That will be really helpful to us. And with that, I want to say goodbye and thank you and have a great afternoon.